Shock Monkey Radio is entertainment for adults, by adults, and the views and opinions expressed here do not reflect upon the sponsors or FXBG Public Radio. For additional information, please refer to the United States Bill of Rights. Stand warned. If you're just now joining us, I just want to let you know, it seems like Google's having some issues. YouTube streaming seems to be having some problems too. It took forever for the go live to actually, cycle through. We thought it was something on our end, but I think it's okay. It looks like we're streaming okay. So normally I like to do a cold open on my rant, but let's go do that now. We'll start the show now.
Action.
I was thinking about those talking door knockers in Labyrinth. They were kind of jerks, were they not? Jerks to each other and jerks to Jennifer Connelly. And how dare they? That woman has been gorgeous all of her life. But I was thinking that it kind of makes sense that they were jerks. Talking, sentient, inanimate objects have a lot of good reasons to be obstinate. One's got a knocker shoved in his mouth and the other has a knocker through his ears. So I can somewhat identify with these characters. But then I think about Cherry from Pee-wee's Playhouse. Also a talking, sentient, inanimate object. Granted, she didn't have anything shoved in her mouth or ears, but people were constantly rubbing their butts on her face. Mostly, it was Pee-wee Herman's butt being rubbed on her face. So why is Chairy so cheery? She has plenty of reasons to be ornery, but somehow she stays positive. Also, she lives in a silly place where the absurdity is a constant source of entertainment, and the door knockers lived within a bleak and dark labyrinth, staring at a wall for eons with just each other for company, with their communication severely hindered. But there are also the stone faces in Labyrinth. You know, the ones shouting, "Beware, turn back now." They also lived in a bleak and dark place, staring at a wall forever. But they were still somewhat kind and jovial with Sarah and Hoggle. So I think it all depends on the individual when it comes to the attitude in which any living creature faces life. So this is a long way to go about saying, stay positive, because it could always be worse. You could be a sentient door knocker with a metal ring shoved through your ears. Welcome to Shock Monkey Radio. I'm your host, the Madman. Try to stay positive. I want to remind you that I have a Patreon. Go to patreon.com. Where's it over here? Patreon.com/shockmonkeyradio. Become a patron today. I would very much appreciate it. Follow me on social media at DeNaultSaw on Twitter, Shock Monkey Radio Redux on Facebook, and at SLRobbins13 on Instagram. I'd appreciate it. Also, books available for digital download. You can find the links to those books in the description below. Not today, not if you're watching live, but tomorrow. And if you want to go and look for it today, look at last week's video. All right. So I would appreciate all of that. So you're probably saying, "Oh, your hair's getting long, Madman," and it is. It's getting. I'm getting to the point where I'll need a haircut, because I decided to start growing it out because I've had my fun. I did a lot of head shaving stuff all during the COVID, and just goofing around doing the half row and the fire starter, the prodigy haircut and stuff like that. And, I have a full head of hair. I should, a lot of good hair in my family. So I should show it off. It's the only redeeming feature, physical feature about me these days. So I figured I'd grow it out. Plus I was like, I was getting to the point where I was like, I have this comb. Should I throw it away? And the answer is no. I've had that comb for like 20 years. I've grown attached to it. So I was like, well, if I'm going to own the comb, I got to have a purpose for it. So I think I'm just growing it out. I'm sure you care about my hair. Anyway, so I went fishing this last weekend. I caught myself a bass, and I love catching bass because, the bluegills, they're all over the place here in Virginia. And bluegills, they just nibble, and then you hope to catch, in their tiny little mouths and stuff like that. But bass, especially largemouth bass, when they hit something, they hit it. And I love it because, because I'm just pulling it. I'm pulling the same lure through the wire, 4 or 5 times, and all of a sudden just wham, and it's like, ooh, that's a bass. So I always like to catch, go once a year, go fishing, and make sure I can still do it. Like if push comes to shove and I absolutely had to eat, I could pull a fish out of the water if I need to be. And it's especially rewarded to like catch one on a lure, instead of live bait. So
I've marked all the addresses in King George that have koi ponds.
Oh, EK is going to raid people's koi ponds if it gets that bad. Okay, cheater.
That's some healthy eating.
Yes, it is. It is healthy eating. So weird. Anyway, so it's always good to go fishing. I also had in that same fishing trip, I also had a stumper dump. I haven't done that in a while. Pooping in the woods. I hate it. Forgot how much I hate it. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So that was my weekend. I hope you had a lot of fun this weekend as well. I got one more thing before I get into the rest of the show, and that is Nichelle Nichols recently passed away. And as I'm sure you know, if you're nerdy enough, she played Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek series, and what a fantastic character, fantastic actress. And it's just like every one of those actors and stuff like that. You appreciate the role, it's even like the military. You appreciate the role, having the first black female like officer, in Starfleet. That was very progressive for the 60s, and back then there was very few, black actresses in the business. And so, she not only, that role helped lead into the civil rights era, saying that absolutely black people are capable. They have thumbs, they have thumbs and brains, they're just as capable as any of us to serve our nation, our federation, and so forth. And so I think that Nichelle Nichols, I think was a very important actress and stuff like that, even if I didn't agree with everything she said. It's the same thing with Shatner. Shatner's kind of an idiot. I find it endearing, but he's still Captain Kirk. You know what I'm saying? I don't always agree with him. I like Sulu's character, but I'm not following George Takei on Twitter. You know what I mean? And so I think it's important to understand, separate the character from the actor, but at the same time, you got to appreciate the groundbreaking work that Nichelle Nichols did in her lifetime. And, I think a lot of nerds are real sad today because, the cast members have been, dropping off, for a while, and soon there's going to come a day when none of them are left. And that's, it's sad to think about, especially when you think about how sad it is Nichelle Nichols has passed on. And, yeah, it's a bummer. I know. Let me cheer you up. With this next bit. I want to remind you that it could always be worse. But have you ever heard of the 1919 Boston molasses flood? All right, this is a crazy story. Now, I just pulled up the Wikipedia article. I was like, I know it's a real reliable source, but when you're talking about something as benign as the Great Molasses Flood, I doubt you're going to get any woke stuff. If you're looking up something like Israel or something, a different story, So, I'm just going to read the first paragraph. The Great Molasses Flood is also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster. It occurred on January 15th in 1919 in the North End neighborhood of Boston. A large storage tank filled with 2.3 million U.S. gallons of molasses, weighing approximately 13,000 short tons or 12,000 regular tons, burst. And as a resultant wave of molasses, it rushed the streets at an estimated 35 miles an hour, killing 21 people and injuring another 150. The event entered local folklore, and residents claimed for decades afterwards the area still smelled of molasses on hot summer days. So if you're in Boston and you're watching, please comment below. Say, does it stink today? Do you smell the sickly sweet smell of molasses in the brickwork or something like that? It was quite, 100 years ago now, a little more than 100 years ago. But really, does it still smell like molasses? And so I was thinking about this the other day when I was watching the news about the flooding in Kentucky. It can always be worse. At least it's water, not molasses. And so I know it's small consolation. But my point is that, it sounds like a supervillain plan cooked up by Willy Wonka. And I know I've mentioned this before. It's like Willy Wonka is either a superhero or a supervillain. I can't figure out which. I'm having a tough time, killing kids and stuff, turning them into blueberries and all that. Supervillain. And like flooding a city like Boston in winter with molasses. That sounds like a supervillain plan cooked up by Willy Wonka or the Hershey's Company or something like that. Now, just imagine for a second, looking out your window, you hear some crashing sound, you look out your window, and there's this brown liquid flooding through the streets with snow on the ground. It's January after all. Molasses just pouring through the streets. People are getting caught in it. And it's hardening as it goes. They said it moved like 35 miles an hour because it was liquid form in the container. And from what I read, I think the cause was they suspected like they had just added a bunch of molasses that came from the Caribbean, and it was warmer than the molasses that was in the tank, and that caused a rupture because of the temperature differential. Caused a rupture in the tank, and that's what caused the flooding of molasses all through Boston. Imagine, you're walking down the street, and you hear this crash. It's just this wave of brown liquid, turns you into a caramel. You know what I mean? It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And, it's just it's so odd as well. It's like, it's something you could never expect, freezing as it goes. I mean, whew. Because it's January in Boston. There's probably 2 feet of snow on the ground. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's absolutely awful, and it's just one of those things that got in my head. I was thinking about it, and I was like, I couldn't imagine. Jeez Louise, like a 10-year-old child. Killed. Causes area today. Yeah, and they say it still stinks. I don't know. If you're from Boston, let me know in the comments. I would like to know because I've never been to Boston. I'd like to see Fenway. Or is that even still there? I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, things could always be worse. All right, we may do an abbreviated news because we got started late. So I do want to talk about like kind of one more subject before we get into that. And I've been watching a lot of Angry Video Game Nerd on YouTube a lot lately. I don't know if you know him. He's he's going to take you back to the past to play the shitty games that suck ass. He'd rather have a buffalo take a diarrhea shit in his ear. He'd rather eat the rotten asshole of a roadkill skunk than down it with beer. You never heard of this guy? Okay. I like it. Okay, it's entertaining. He has way more subscribers than me. I get it. I do. I think that, number one, he has horrible taste in beer. He drinks Rolling Rock. And it's like, somebody needs to tell this kid, you need to grow up and drink beer like a man. They put the shitty beer in green bottles. You don't know that? Grow up. Drink beer like a man. Two, he swears way too much, I think. I know that it apparently seems to work for him. He has way more subscribers than me. And there are people who say you need to swear more, Madman. And that's just, I'll swear when I want to, goddammit. All right. So, there's that. And then there's three, he really leans really hard on the scatological. And I think there is a line that gets crossed. But he's the Angry Video Game Nerd. And he goes around, he talks about these old video games that I, grew up on. He reviews old Atari games, particularly shitty ones, old Atari games, old NES games, ColecoVision, Intellivision, those original Pong games and stuff like that. So I've been watching a lot of that lately. And so I've been thinking about like when I was growing up and how I experienced the video game, I guess, revolution as it began, because that happened in my lifetime. The Atari 2600 is the same age as me. I'm actually a little bit older. I was born in May, and I think that was released in September of 77. So I'm just a little bit older than the Atari, and I didn't get my Atari till 1983. I had to have a conversation with my dad about this because, you know, it was 40 years ago. It's kind of distant in both of our memories. And so, yeah, I got my Atari 2600 in 1983, and we were living in Petersburg, Virginia. And it's an interesting story because my dad, my uncle, and my grandfather like went around getting like different pieces of this Atari. You know, it said my dad said he thinks my grandfather got the Atari deck in one game, but there was like a power issue. You know, and it was like a broken unit. Somebody had like given him a broken unit or something like that, and so he had to like solder the power cord so that, you know, got it to work. You know, and they also had issues with one of the joysticks. They had to solder some pieces. They got the joystick to work.
So buying a new joystick? Are you kidding me? Soldering shit back together?
You act like everybody's rich. All right, we're broke people. You know, I was poor. You know, and that's the way we lived. But, you know, the point is that my grandfather was the kind of guy who could fix that kind of stuff. I know, and so and plus, additionally, those Atari games, they were $50 even back in 1983 to buy one. You know, $50 in 1983. And I remember all through the consoles things, that was about the price that you'd pay. You know, and I'm just thinking it's like you pick up some of these, like I was picking up these PlayStation 2 games. I was like, I can't believe this is the same price as Skydiver, as Combat was back in the day. These horrible, horrible Atari games. These horrible Atari 2600 games. And listen to me. A lot of you kids don't understand what it was like growing up in that era. All right. When I was a kid in 1983, you know, there was like maybe like there's afternoon cartoons after school for programming for kids on TV. You had Saturday morning cartoons. And then you had, like on Sundays, you had The Wonderful World of Disney, and that's all the programming that was available for kids on television. Okay, we didn't have cable TV. Hell, we didn't even have color TV until like I think the mid to late 80s. All right, so we're sitting there watching black and white TV, and like 90% of the programming is news and soap operas and stuff kids don't want to watch. So, you know, I sat in my room and read. You know, I went outside and played. You remember that, kids? I went outside and played. You know, I played with my action figures in the dirt. I played with He-Man. We had those little wrestling guys, and we'd fight them in the ring in our driveway, riding bikes around, making ramps. You know, because there was no video games. There was no video games, and we had two TVs, and both of them were black and white. We had one out in the living room and one in my parents' bedroom. And so we loved video games because video games were all in the arcades. And you can go to the arcades all you want. This was a big deal in the 70s, early 80s. It's like go to the arcade, but you're still, you know, you're pumping a quarter a play. And so the idea of getting an Atari home so you could sit there and like play your favorite game without having to dump, you know, all your allowance into a machine sounded awesome. And so with the ingenuity of my family and just the idea of my dad and my grandpa, you know, playing these Atari games, these combat, we got to make sure you know, press all the directions, make sure the joystick works. Whatever. Bang, got you again. Ha ha. Got you, Dad. That idea is very entertaining in my head because he said they had to test it out. They had to make sure it worked. And so I think that's hilarious. And so, I think about those first games I got, you know, and because you get the Atari 2600, you only got a couple games. And I got Combat, of course, everyone got Combat. And I had Skydiver, which is you jump out of an airplane and you're supposed to land on this pad. And sometimes the pad's moving, sometimes it's, you know, it's not. It depends on what level you're on. And then I had a baseball game called Home Run, which was terrible. Even in comparison to other Atari baseball games, it was terrible. And so back in those days, you know, the games didn't really have like a linear plot. They weren't even like NES games where you had like level 1-1 to 8-8, you know, 8-3 or whatever like that, like in Super Mario Brothers. You didn't even have any of that. It was just like a pattern, a program pattern, stuff like that. If you remember that game Kaboom, it's a guy at the top dropping bombs, and you have to move these paddles back and forth to block the bombs to keep them from reaching the bottom. And so after you beat the level, it just kept getting faster and faster and faster and faster. It's the same thing with like games like Asteroids. You're shooting all these asteroids and stuff like that, and as you level up, you just get more. It gets more and more challenging. So you don't understand, and you'd have these arguments with people, and it's like, you got 50,000 in asteroids. It even made E.T. It's like he comes in, it's like, hey, Tony said he got like 50,000 in asteroids. And there was a time in our life where you have conversations with your friend. He said he got 50,000 in asteroids. And you're like, bullshit. No possible way. Because that's how you kept track of like how good anyone was points, because there wasn't really any like, I'd gotten to this point or that point in the game, or I've done this in the game. It wasn't like that. It's like we measured it on your score, on your points. And it was funny because I remember I was lucky enough not to get the Pac-Man game for the Atari 2600 because it was awful. In comparison to the Pac-Man you'd play in the arcade, it was just a disgusting mess, like blinking, fading, yellow, piss-colored ghosts and Pac-Man. Oh, it was awful. It was so bad. You kids today, you have no idea. What these games today, they don't have these points anymore where you feel frustrated. If you get to a point where like you get to a mission you can't beat, there's always something else you can go do in modern games. But the Atari 2600 or those earlier systems, no, it was a different thing altogether. And when it comes to and then after the 2600, you could say Madman, the Nintendo Entertainment System came out in 83 or 84, something like that. And it's like, yeah, that's when I still had black and white TV in 83. All right, I still, I was still playing. I got my Atari 2600 because they were cheaper because the NES was coming out. And a few years later, I did get to play a lot of NES because everyone else had a NES, but I still had just the Atari. So I remember playing those NES games, and it was a whole different world when those NES games came out. Especially when you talk about games like Metroid and The Legend of Zelda, and it blew our minds. I remember it was like 1986 or 7. I was playing these games. I was like 8 years old, 9 years old, something like that. No, 11 years old. 86, 9 years old. So, but I remember, it would capture your mind. Just the whole vast world of Metroid. You run through that one room and you see there's blocks, and then there's space down below. It's like, do we get to go down there at some point? And you're trying to figure all this out. And so you'd be sitting there in class. You're 5 times 8 is what? And you're 40-ish. How many? And your mind is just stuck. It's like, how do I get to Ganon? Where is Ganon's dungeon? It was like, I cannot find. I've done levels 1 through 5. I can't find any more. And it's like, oh well. And then you go to school and you have this conversation with his friend. He's like, yeah, you go over here, and this is where this, you burn this bush. I think it was level 6 in Legend of Zelda where you had to burn a bush to find the entrance to the dungeon. And so, and he was like, no kidding. It was like, I didn't even buy a candle. You'd have these conversations with these guys in Metroid and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, man, you know how you can turn into a ball? Yeah, I found these bombs where you can lay bombs. It's like, no kidding. So in that room, yeah, you could bomb the floor, drop down in there. Learning these things, your big puzzles that you had to solve in your head, and, you couldn't wait to get home. Try to figure out how much further you can get in Metroid. It's like, I got this screw attack thing, man. And you're like, screw attack? That sounds awesome. Is it exactly what I think it is? It's like, no. You spin when you jump, and it kind of makes you, immortal. And you're like, oh, that doesn't sound as fun as I thought it would be. So, then you get the Justin Bailey code, and it's like, oh, now it makes sense. And so, and that's what I mean. You had those codes, those codes that you'd get and you'd figure out. This was slightly before Nintendo Power came out, which ruined the whole thing, the whole social aspect of you and your friend group trying to figure something out. some rich kid gets a subscription to Nintendo Power for Christmas, and he's coming in spoiling everything for everybody. Oh, this is how you get past, this is how you beat Dracula. It's like, you didn't get to Dracula. Bullshit. Nobody can get down that hallway. We've been trying for years. Nobody can get down that hallway. It's like, oh yeah, there's a pattern. You got to wait for the Medusas. And it's like, how do you know that? Did you sit there? It's like, no, I read it in Nintendo Power. That takes away all the fun. Thank you, Nintendo Power. Thank you for taking all the fun out of my video games. I'm harboring a grudge against Nintendo. And so, I mean, that was my point. It's like you get these codes and stuff like that, but it would just open your mind up to a whole new world of Nintendo, of video gaming. And then you had games like Mega Man, and it's like weird, where you have these conversations with your friends, like, can't hurt this guy. Like, try this weapon. Try different weapons. It's like, oh, different weapons? I just want to use the gun. I don't want to use the boomerangs or something. And then there was like Final Fantasy, and that's when like the RPG aspect really I really liked that more than Legend of Zelda, because it was more like D&D style in many ways. Because Legend of Zelda is an action game, make no doubts about it, with a lot of role-playing elements. But Final Fantasy was like a real like stat role-playing game where you keep track of the stats, you watch your spells and stuff like that. Yeah, it was very like true RPG game.
And your gear mattered too.
Yeah, and your gear mattered, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, and that was great and everything. And by the time I got a NES, that's when the SNES came out and the Sega Genesis came out. So it was like there was like a year and a half between I had a NES and then I had a Sega Genesis. And the Sega Genesis was part of the, it does what Nintendo don't, as they say. And so is the 16-bit revolution, and Sonic the Hedgehog blew your mind. And I like Sonic way more than Mario. I think Mario's goofy. I think Nintendo is for children. And I think, Sega Genesis was for, the preteen I was growing into. I wanted more mature titles like Altered Beasts, I like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it was a little cartoony and a little bit too action-oriented. And I eventually got, like, the second game I got was Joe Montana's Sports Talk Football. And that was funny because it was one of those first games that had, like, live or voice, sounds coming from it. It's like, the game's talking to me. And that's how they advertised the game on TV. It's like, it talks. It's like, it's Joe Montana's or voice. And you're like, whoa, blow my mind. Now it's just like... You're like, if it's not a celebrity voice, who cares? It's like, oh, some broadcaster from, Los Angeles did the voice. Who cares? It's like Queen said, just, don't become that background noise.
My football game voiced by Jim Gaffigan.
Jim Gaffigan. Jim Gaffigan, Sports Talk Football. We can make a lot of money. We can help him make a lot of money. Also, I did Uncharted Waters. I like that one. Uncharted Waters is a game I rented almost every week from the video store. If you remember those, we go and we video games. So like my mom would be like, "You want to rent that one again?" It's like, yes, I love this game. And it was like a strategy, a seafaring game. And if you look back on my channel, I've played some of these games on YouTube channel. You can go check them out. Me beating Legend of Zelda. And EK. I think EK was here too. Yeah. And like Uncharted Waters and stuff like that. Playing some of these games. Go check that out. But I was always... And so it's like the Sega Genesis turned me into a Sega nerd, and I really hated Nintendo because it kind of stayed in the kind of the kid realm in many ways. Sure, you had more adult games, but the Sega Genesis and later the PlayStation that I got. Well, I didn't have, but the PlayStation that I played, they had more adult games. Like my friend who I joined the Navy with, he had a PlayStation, and he had like a game called Blast Chamber, and we played that a lot. It's like you have this exploding bomb, you're trying to give it to the other person or something like that, and get away before they blow up, before the bomb blows up. It was a really dumb, basic PlayStation game, but it was multiplayer, so we liked it. And then it was Resident Evil. Now, I don't know if you remember when this game came out. Its controls were awkward. The loading times were ridiculous.
Terrifying.
but it was terrifying. And I remember my friend, came over, and this is like right before, like the night before I went into the Navy. He was over at my house with his PlayStation hooked up to my TV, and we were playing Resident Evil. And yeah, terrified out of my mind, saying, man, I'm going to miss this kind of stuff while I'm in the Navy. And that was a fun game. It was a fun game, and it created the survival horror genre, So I was able to see all of that up until I joined the Navy. And then it was bye-bye consoles for a while. It wasn't until I was like an E3, or E4, where I was able to buy my own PlayStation, and I started playing Resident Evil 2, which was old at the time. I think 3 was out at that point. And then, I see it like Final Fantasy, was 7 came out, and it's just like how many Final Fantasies they put out on Nintendo or Super Nintendo. Was it 7 that was on the PlayStation where they started with the Chocobo racing and stuff like that? Oh, what an absurd game. Yeah, and it's been like that weird anime stuff ever since. And so a lot of times you feel like it's Scorcher 4. No one wants to watch this, It's so oversaturated that it's become bastardized and uninteresting. I like that original Final Fantasy, those different character classes and stuff like that. But now it's all become, over. Even Resident Evil now, way overplayed. And people, you can say that about modern games too, like Call of Duty, stuff like that. Even modern games to this day, and it's kind of like followed the same pattern ever since. So I think, that was just. I feel like I was lucky to have experienced like the birth of it, because I didn't even talk about like computers and computer games and stuff like that, about how I was programming in BASIC when I was like 7 years old. My dad and I talked about that, and he's like, I brought that Tandy home. Next thing I know, you're writing programs. I'm like, yeah, well, I read the book, the book covered basic programming. That's all caps, basic. And you know why it's called basic? Because it's super easy. Anyway, it's so, yeah. So I was watching Angry Video Game Nerd, and he's a little younger than me, so his experience is a little different. But apparently he has the money to go and like, cough up the money for some of these old systems and plays them, And if you know anything about it, there's like tons of like rare games, like that go for a lot of money, like on eBay nowadays. And even those 8-bit, those old, not even 8-bit, those old Atari games and television games, some of those, they'll have the game, but they also would have this overlay that you need to put on your screen for the game itself. For each game, they'd have put this plastic film over the thing. So, and then you got a playing area. It was super weird when it first started happening. But I mean, some of it goes for real pretty pennies. There's like pornographic Atari games. I've played a couple of them. They're ridiculous. They are absurdly ridiculous. And it's it's funny because they're rare, because there's no way mom's going to give that to a kid. And so it's that old pixelated art that they had on Atari is like, who's enjoying this in an erotic way, And then you'll have like real obscure like Nintendo games, and third party games that were like not approved by anyway. And so a lot of these things, they're kind of like comic books in that way, because some of them are rare. Nowadays software is just a copy. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I can copy that over to you. Even these old Nintendo games, you can get emulators of them. You can buy them at the store. You can go like buy a little tiny Nintendo shaped thing with a control pad that has like every single Nintendo game ever made on it. Which is wish.com. What you say?
Go to wish.com.
Wish.com is like, buy me one. And like all those cartridges and stuff that we collected. We're so silly. It's just like music back in the day. I remember like friends would have like a whole wall full of like CDs, and you're just like, man, and then you got to move. He goes like, can you help me move? And it's like, hell no, man. I'm not carrying all those CDs. Anyway. All right. Wow. I really burnt a lot of time on that. So we'll go through the news worth knowing somewhat quickly. All right. So we had a couple of admitted Democrat victories this week. I'll give it to them. So the CIA targeted al-Zawahiri alone on his balcony after months of surveillance, building his pattern of life. So as you may have heard, the CIA took out, and therefore the United States, al-Zawahiri. He was like he was like really kind of the mastermind. He was the John Lennon, and Osama bin Laden was the what's his name, Paul McCartney. I'm sorry to put it in those terms, but I think the equally evil people, if you ask me. But it's a good hit. It's 21 years late. He was in Afghanistan. If only there had been American troops anywhere near there. So I find that kind of weird. Why weren't American troops in Afghanistan at some point? I think there might have been a reason that they were in Afghanistan. But I'm putting that out there that, it seems a little weird. But, we did get him. He's definitely, he was taken out by a precision drone strike. Guy would apparently go out and sit on the balcony or maybe pray on the balcony. Every morning they realize it's a pattern. So it's like, oh, okay. It's easy when people have patterns like that, they're easy to hit. And so, I admit, it's a good move, but exactly, how long have they been sitting on his location? And why now, Democrats? Why did the Biden administration, I would say Joe Biden, but it's the Biden administration that made this call. Why now? And it's because, they know they're looking bad in the polls. It's the same thing as like Joe Biden pulling out a million barrels of gasoline out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve every day since then. And so when they say gas prices are going down, it's because of that. All right. But it's not fixing the problem. You need to turn on the taps instead of raiding the bank account. You know what I'm saying? And so, it is a victory, but let's be honest, it's very suspicious why you're doing it now. You're trying to look strong. It is a victory, but apparently you're probably sitting on this information for a while. It's widely known that it took Barack Obama a few days to decide to strike Osama bin Laden. I can't imagine those military guys are all on standby waiting for this dumbass Democrat to make a decision. Anyway, and that may be the case with this al-Zawahiri. There could have been like CIA guys ready to pounce. We got the drones. They're ready to go. Just wait. Finally, they get the order. Anyway. Now, the other good thing that the Democrats did was Nancy Pelosi is departing Taiwan after her visit was criticized by China. I'm sure you've heard about this as well. Nancy Pelosi and a congressional delegation went to visit Taiwan, and there was a little bit of saber rattling from China. All right, let's see. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has landed and has left with a congressional delegation in Taiwan. 4 U.S. Navy warships are operating east of Taiwan in what officials are standard military drills amid heightened tensions with Beijing. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs calls Pelosi's trip a, quote, political provocation and says Beijing absolutely does not accept this. And the reason why they say that is because China believes that Taiwan is theirs, but everyone knows that the government in Taiwan, Taiwan owns China. That's the truth. The government, the legitimate government of China was tossed out and fled after Mao Zedong came to power and turned it into the hellhole it is today. And so they ran to Taiwan. So that's why, Nancy Pelosi, went there. And good for her. Good for her. I mean, granted, I know that, number one, they sent Nancy Pelosi because communists aren't going to shoot down a communist. You know what I'm saying? So we know that. Okay. She's going to be fine. Anyone who was like talking before she went over there is like, oh, this could spark World War III. It's like, they're not going to shoot down Nancy Pelosi. They're not going to do something that great for America. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm glad nothing happened to her. I didn't think anything would happen to her. And that's the point. Plus, she's probably going over there to buy some stocks in a way to make herself rich. So I'm sure there's a profit motive in there for her. But the point is that, we should be on Taiwan's side. All right. I'm sorry. It's like China is an enemy. They're a horrible, horrible, horrible country. And it's not the people, it's the government of that country that's horrible. All right. And so when you hear China say things like, oh, we're going to shoot down Nancy Pelosi, or even imply that, you're like, I just want to smile at China's face and be like, look, man, you wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare. And they're like pulling out tanks and driving around, and they got their ships going back and forth. They're flexing their military muscles, but you wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare try to start that fight with us, because we'd mop the floor with you. And then maybe bring some justice to your population, your oppressed population. Get rid of that corrupt-ass government and spread some of the wealth that you've been making by charging everybody to do their manufacturing, outsourcing all this work that the West has been foolishly put in your country. Have those workers actually get a chance to eat something other than bats. Okay? You wouldn't dare, China. Anyway, let's go to this next story. Yeah. I may have to go quicker. All right, so mom threatens Texas House meeting with ambulance chasing lawsuits over the CRT. So this is this lady. I want to read. She it's talking about the school board. All right. It's like, if my daughter is taught CRT at all, I will sue you. If my daughter is taught social and emotional learning at all, I will sue you. I am encouraging every parent I know to sue you, to sue every teacher, every principal, every system, everybody up the chain, because we're tired of y'all. Yes, ma'am. She goes on to say, I am an atheist, bisexual, biracial, homeless person. I do not want my child being taught that just because she is black and a woman, she ain't going to make it. I do not want my daughter to be taught that she needs to express herself sexually in her classroom. She had a really good rant. You really should read it, but I need to move on. I just want to read this one last quote from her. I got to find it. All right. Y'all are tripping, Clark said at the meeting. Every single day we go to school and we see our teachers lie to us, lie right to our faces. And y'all say you have our best interests at heart. So why does everything have to be so difficult? Why do you have to be a lawyer in order to figure all this stuff out? Fantastic rant. And you don't have to believe in the same things that I believe in order to appreciate what this woman is saying. Get your damn hands off my children's bodies and minds. What is wrong with you? I understand that frustration. I feel blessed that I don't have children that have to deal with this kind of stuff. There's no way I could afford to homeschool them. I don't have a degree. Girls with degrees don't want to date a guy who doesn't have one. Anyway, the point is that, I think parents are just pissed. And it doesn't matter where you lie across the political aisle, you're sick and tired of this nonsense. So they are tripping. And God bless you for keeping it real. All right, so as you know, Paul Pelosi, more information about his DUI has come out. So apparently he was slurring his speech, and it was a 2021 Porsche. Jeez Louise. It was a major collision about 10:17 p.m. on May 28th. He had red, watery eyes. They apparently found a drug in his system. They didn't say. It's probably Xanax or something. But a guy that old, he's probably on medication anyway. So, yeah, and I think he blew a .083, which is over the limit. And so, I mean, I think he's heading to court here soon. But here's what I find most interesting. Pelosi allegedly handed officers his driver's license and an $11.99 foundation card when they asked for his ID, according to the documents. The $11.99 Foundation is a California Highway Patrol charity that supports officers and provides scholarships for their children. That I find interesting. I really don't like things like that. When somebody does something like that, it's like, hey, you know, it's like people putting the Fraternal Order of Police thing on their car, but they're not a part of the police, you know? You're just trying to get out of tickets that way. And I don't think that that's right. I don't think that you should donate to a cause like that because you think it'll get you out of trouble. And that's what he was doing. He was pulling out his get-out-of-jail-free card. People always say, like on the Monopoly board, is like, that's not a real thing. It's like, yes, it is. It is a thing. And it's things like that. Because a cop could have said, okay, I'm not going to, you're going to have to deal with this with your insurance and stuff like that, with this accident and stuff like that, but I'm not putting on this report that you blew 0.083. And that's what Paul Pelosi was hoping for. And that's everything that's wrong with people like him and his wife. You think you are better than everyone else. Anyway, two more stories. I don't know if you've seen this video, but an elderly California store owner shot at a would-be robber. And if you haven't seen this video, it's amazing. All right. And this happened in California. All right. So the 80-year-old California liquor store owner caught on video opening fire at a would-be robber with a shotgun is now speaking out, saying, I did a lot of hunting when I was a kid. The incident was early Sunday, excuse me, at Norco Market and Liquor in Norco, just east of Los Angeles. It prompted the armed suspect to run out of the business screaming, "He shot my arm off." Yeah, the guy came in holding like what they call an assault rifle, a semi-automatic, assault style weapon. I forget what it was. I don't remember. But he just pointed at him, and the guy shot at him, hit him in the arm. Guy ran away. You know why? Because he really didn't expect resistance. He went in there with that gun, not even thinking he was ever going to have to use it. But that's the point. Even in California, even in LA, there are people who are willing to stand that line. It's like I say about like all these times that people with looters. When looters start running into your store and start grabbing stuff, you don't need to shoot them all. You shoot one, and you can wound them. And boom, problem solved. And I think that's a point that a lot of people have forgotten, about America. All it takes to stand up to these bullies is to stand up to them. When I was, there was some bully pushing me around and stuff like that when I was growing up. You pop him once in the face, it's done. And he's like, hey, can I let you borrow Legend of Zelda? Can I let you borrow Metroid? And so when some guy comes in your store, especially in California, where they're just letting these people go who commit these crimes, he comes in there with a gun, not thinking he's even going to use it. It's just like a part of a costume. It's just part of his mask. Plus, then the guy fires back at him with a shotgun, gets hit in the arm, and he's screaming, "Oh, he blew my arm off." It's like, and he and his friends all dip back into the car. Luckily, they pointed their license plate directly at the camera, so these guys got caught. All right? So good on that guy, and that's how it should be done. That's America for you. All right, so last story before we get out of here. Man who tried to kill spider with lighter sparked a Utah blaze. A major wildfire in Utah started thanks to a man who was trying to kill a spider with a lighter, police said on Tuesday. Utah County Sheriff's Office arrested the unidentified man on Monday, even as flames consumed a 60-acre area outside of Springville, police said. Authorities also discovered marijuana and other drug paraphernalia in the man's possession. Well, there it is. God. Look, if you're going to be an idiot, do it in the safety of your own home. When it comes to like going out in the wild and starting fires, that's incredibly dangerous. I'm sure I told you the story about how I got that ticket, for drinking beer and what happened is we got to that campsite and somebody else who had been to that campsite had lit the tree on fire and it was all black and stuff like that. And I was just like, there was probably some sort of accident, or maybe somebody intentionally set that tree on fire, but it quickly got out of control because it's the forest. If you're going to be an idiot,
Everything's flammable here.
yeah, everything's flammable. Everything flams. All right. And so that's why, like, they had Smokey Bear, because so much of this starts this way because people are morons. So I want to remind you to stop being idiots. Anyway, that's going to be the end of our show. I want to remind you again to go to patreon.com/shockmonkeyradio. Become a patron. $3 a month. It's nothing. Half a gallon of gas. Well, I guess it's closer to two-thirds a gallon of gas. $3 a month. I would appreciate it. Patreon.com/shockmonkeyradio. I also have Cash App. If you want to send me money through Cash App, use the hashtag shockmonkeyradio, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Denalitsaw. That's the word wasteland spelled backwards. Follow me on Shock Monkey Radio Redux on Facebook and at SLRobbins13 on Instagram. I also have books available for digital download on Amazon.com. Search for the author Scott L. Robbins with 2 T's and 2 B's. I also will have links down in the description below to those books. I would appreciate it. So this has been Shock Monkey Radio. I'm the Madman, and I love you.